Welcome to Lost Whispers Secrets. Standing motionless beside the hospital bed, I watched as my wife, Vanessa, cradled the newborn swaddled in a soft pink blanket. Her expression glowed with a mixture of fatigue and radiant joy, her smile unwavering as she gazed down at the tiny life in her arms. On either side of her stood my mother, Margaret, and my mother-in-law, Celeste, both beaming with pride. I, however, remained distant, neither stepping closer nor reaching out. I felt my mother's eyes on me, sharp, probing, even in the midst of what should have been a moment of happiness. But she said nothing. Not yet. The door creaked open and a nurse entered, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Hale, I need you to complete the birth certificate form." I turned toward her, voice calm but firm. "We'll handle it after a DNA test confirms I'm the father." Vanessa's head whipped around, the sudden motion jostling the baby against her chest. Her eyes widened in disbelief, lips parting in stunned silence. Celeste gasped sharply, her hand flying to her chest, while Margaret stiffened beside her, her gaze flitting between me and Vanessa. Rage twisted across Vanessa's face. "How dare you, Daniel?" she hissed, her voice cracking with fury. "Are you seriously accusing me of being unfaithful?" I didn't flinch under her glare. "No," I said evenly. "I'm stating what I know, that you were unfaithful. And now, I'm ensuring that child is mine before I sign anything." Celeste stepped forward, her tone low, almost pleading. "Daniel, this isn't the moment," she urged, hand half lifted in a gesture of restraint. "Your wife just gave birth. These accusations could break her. You're pushing her toward postpartum collapse. Think about the baby." My mother wasn't so diplomatic. Margaret exhaled sharply, her voice rising in fury as she jabbed a trembling finger in my direction. "You should be ashamed," she snapped. "Accusing your wife now, of all times? This is vile. I didn't raise you to be this heartless." I stood silently, my gaze fixed on Vanessa. Her breathing was erratic, arms locked protectively around the infant, her terrified eyes darting between the two women speaking for her. I let their words hang in the room a moment, then slowly raised my hand, silencing the noise. "Vanessa," I said, eyes steady on hers, "should I call your lover Julian Cross?" Her entire body jolted as if I'd struck her. "What?" she gasped, her face contorting in panic. "No. I haven't spoken to him." I nodded slowly, reached into my pocket. "Then explain this," I said, unfolding a sheet of paper with care. "If there's nothing to hide, what is this?" I smoothed out the message, holding it as I read aloud. "My husband can't ever find out. I want nothing to do with you anymore." The blood drained from her face. The room froze. Even the medical equipment sounded louder in the stillness. Her sob broke the silence. "Where did you get that?" she choked out. I let the paper dangle from my hand, my eyes locked onto hers. "He sent it to me," I replied. Screenshot and all. Her whole body was trembling now, breath ragged, lips quivering as more tears began to fall. She held the child tighter, as if the infant could shield her from what she'd unleashed. Then, voice low and shattered, she whispered, "He promised no one would ever know." Vanessa broke entirely, clutching the baby as her sobs consumed her. Her shoulders trembled violently, cheeks soaked with regret. But I didn't let the moment soften. I didn't offer comfort. "So it's true," I said, cold and sharp. "You did sleep with him. You got pregnant by him." The words left my mouth like a verdict. Vanessa whimpered, shaking her head violently, tears blurring her already broken expression. But before she could say a word, my mother, Margaret, cut in, sharp, but pleading. "Daniel, stop. There's no proof yet the child isn't yours." Celeste, clearly still in shock, nodded in frantic agreement. Yes, please. What if the baby is yours? You can't jump to the worst conclusion." I exhaled slowly, the weight of 4 months of buried agony pressing down on my chest like a slab of stone. My fists curled reflexively before I forced my fingers to release. My voice was low, composed, deliberate. "I've known about her affair for 4 months, I said, watching the shock ripple across Vanessa's face. She flinched. I waited. I waited for the child to be born so we could get the DNA test. You knew? She whispered, voice quivering with disbelief and guilt. But I didn't look at her. I turned instead to the two women who stood between us. I let her have her pregnancy in peace, I continued. I didn't want to bring stress or darkness into what should have been a safe time for her. But now that the child is here, it's time to face the truth. I drew in a breath and spoke without pause. If the baby's mine, I'll be his father. If not, I'm walking away. Celeste's faint sob reached my ears, but I didn't acknowledge it. And as for her, I said, tilting my head toward Vanessa, who was now crying silently, shoulders shaking, she is no longer my wife. That chapter ends here. A long silence settled over the room like fog. My mother rubbed her temples, searching for something to say, something to pull us back from the edge. Finally, her voice came, softer, uncertain, but laced with desperate hope. Daniel, the child is innocent. He needs a father. A single mother can't carry that burden alone. You need to at least consider reconciliation. Counseling. I turned toward her, my jaw tightening. And for what, Mom? To sit in front of some therapist and be told how my wife's betrayal is somehow my fault? That I failed to give her enough affection or attention, and that's why she ended up in some other man's bed? To be told that the child she brought into this world from another man is a blessing I should embrace, that her cheating has strengthened our marriage, that we're stronger now, somehow? I stepped closer, my voice dropping with bitter disgust. You want me to play along? Smile and act like I'm grateful to raise another man's son? You want me to be that guy? You know what that makes me, Mom? A willing cuck. That's what it means. Is that what you want? For your son to be the man who quietly accepts betrayal and calls it love? Margaret's lips parted. No sound came out. Her face turned pale. She had nothing. I shook my head slowly, disbelief hardening into steel. You want me to suffer more? I let out a low, mirthless laugh. I sometimes wonder if I was adopted, you know that? Because I can't believe my own mother would ask this of me. The silence that followed was suffocating. Margaret said nothing more. She didn't need to. She understood. She knew. I turned to Celeste. She was clutching Vanessa like she might fall apart at any moment. After she's released, I said flatly, please take her with you. Her things are already packed. You can send me the address if you prefer them delivered somewhere else. But she is not stepping foot in my home again. Vanessa let out a quiet, fractured sob, hiding her face in her hands. I didn't spare her a glance. She no longer deserved the privilege of my gaze. I turned back to my mother, who stood there still, silent and stunned. Do what you want, I told her, my tone controlled but cold. I won't dictate your relationships. I know you and Celeste have been close since childhood. If you want to maintain that, fine. But don't ask me to compromise myself. My voice darkened. I won't force my boundaries on you. So don't force yours on me. I paused, letting the words settle like concrete. And like I said, if the baby is mine, I'll be a father to him. But I will never again be a husband to her. If he's not mine, then don't ever try to guilt me into staying in a life built on her betrayal. With that, I turned and left the room. Just as I reached the door, I caught the nurse's eyes. She had been standing there the whole time, quietly bearing witness to everything. For a fleeting second, our eyes locked. Her expression said it all, not judgment, not shock, just quiet sympathy. That evening, I sat alone in my now colder, quieter home. My phone buzzed. I didn't need to check the screen to know who it was. I sighed, let it ring once more, then picked up. My mother's voice came soft, but resolute. Daniel, I don't excuse what Vanessa did, she began. But right now, she needs support. So does Celeste. I'm with them, and I'll continue to be here. I closed my eyes, fingers tightening against my temple. Of course she was there. I had anticipated as much, but hearing it was something else entirely. I've treated her like a daughter since she was just a girl, she continued. I can't flip a switch and unlove her. There was a pause, a breath held. I don't know what the DNA test will say. But I pray he's yours. I pray, somehow, you two find a way back to each other. That was it. That was my threshold. My grip around the phone hardened as I cut her off. Mom, the marriage is finished, I said, my tone flat and unshakable. Even if the child turns out to be mine, I'm done. Please stop pretending there's anything left to salvage. Daniel, she tried to protest, but I didn't let her finish. If you keep pressing this, then to me, you no longer have a son. Is that clear? Silence. Then a breath. I hear you, she murmured. I ended the call without saying goodbye. 2 days later, I let actions speak louder than anything else. The divorce papers were served to Vanessa. I made sure the moment would cut through whatever illusions she still clung to. Her credit cards cancelled. Our joint account? Closed. I had withdrawn my portion and locked down the rest until the courts decided. Investments? Frozen. Later that day, my phone rang again. I didn't even need to look. I knew. I answered with a sigh already curling at the edge of my breath. You shouldn't have done that, she snapped without preamble. She hasn't recovered, physically or emotionally. And you drop this on her now? I'm ashamed of you, Daniel. I never thought you capable of such cruelty. I pressed 2 fingers to the bridge of my nose, trying to hold back the tide. Cruel? I echoed, voice low, sharp. Where was her compassion when she was screwing another man? Was that her heart guiding her too? My mother went silent. But I didn't. Was she thinking about her vows, her husband, when she decided to let another man touch her? Where was her guilt then? You know the answer, I continued coldly. So stop throwing her sins at my feet. I'm not the cause, I'm the consequence. There was nothing but breath on the other end of the line. No excuses. No arguments. Just silence. Stop blaming me, I said, my voice frigid now. Or I'll start holding you accountable for what you're choosing to defend. Then I ended the call. The phone clattered onto the passenger seat beside me. 3 days passed. The DNA test arrived. My hands shook slightly as I slit the envelope open, though deep down, I already knew what it would say. Not the father. I stared at the words. Not with anger. Not with relief. Just stillness. The final thread of doubt snapped, quietly. I folded the paper slowly, slid it back inside the envelope, picked up my keys, and walked out the door. My destination, Celeste's house. I reached Celeste's house in just under 30 minutes. As I stepped out of the car, I inhaled deeply, steadying myself for the confrontation ahead. I knew this moment would shift everything, for me, for Vanessa, and for everyone else tangled in this mess. I knocked. The door opened almost instantly. Vanessa stood there, her face lighting up with a mix of relief, delusion, and something disturbingly close to smugness. You came, she said softly, emotion thick in her voice. I knew you'd come back. She gave a faint, almost triumphant smile. I just told Mom you'd return. I knew you loved me too much to stay away. She stepped forward, arms lifted as if expecting me to wrap her in them. I raised my hand sharply, halting her. Enough with the theater, I said, my voice like steel. Where's your mother? I'm here to see her. Go get her. The glow in her eyes flickered, then dimmed into something empty. Her smile collapsed. She blinked. Oh, she whispered, stepping aside. Come in. I entered without a word, my footsteps echoing against the stillness of the house. A moment later, Celeste appeared from the hallway. But she wasn't alone. My mother followed, holding the infant in her arms. Her expression lit up when she saw me, bright with fragile hope. She stepped forward, gently rocking the baby as if that motion alone might fix everything. Look, she beamed. He has your eyes. Doesn't he look just like you? She took another step toward me. Just hold him, just once, and you'll remember what matters. We could still be a family. I stepped back. Mom, stop, I said flatly. Don't do this. She froze, her face cracking in confusion and pain. I told you not to keep forcing this, I continued, my voice now glacial. Then, With calm finality, I pulled the envelope from my pocket and held it out to Celeste. "Read it," I said, making sure everyone in the room heard every syllable. Her fingers trembled as she took it. She opened the letter, eyes scanning its contents, and then her lips moved, faintly at first. Her voice broke the silence. "Sample A. Probability of paternity 0%. You are not the father." A single exhale escaped her lips like she'd been punched. She sank onto a chair, clutching her head, the letter dropping to her lap. The room went still, air heavy and suffocating. My mother slowly reached for the paper next. She stared at it, lips twitching as she mouthed the words in silence. Then, as though her body finally registered the truth, she lowered herself into the seat beside Celeste. "Oh no," she whispered, voice fractured. I let the silence linger. Let it wrap around them, tight and unrelenting. Then I spoke, my tone stripped of empathy. "I came to say this once and for all, stop pressuring me. You wanted proof. There it is. I'm not this child's father." My eyes swept across them, Celeste still bent in disbelief, my mother still holding someone else's child. As I said before, I will not play father to a child who isn't mine. Then I looked at my mother, and all the weariness, all the ice in my chest, surfaced in my voice. "I hope this is what you wanted," I said. "Or maybe it's not. Either way, I don't care anymore. This boy isn't your grandson. The daughter you cherish like family made sure of that." I tilted my head toward Vanessa, who stood frozen, tears streaming, lips parted but silent. "Don't ever ask me again to take responsibility for something that isn't mine." I turned toward the door, ready to leave this entire wreckage behind. But just as my fingers brushed the doorknob, my mother's voice cut through the room. "Daniel, wait." I paused, but didn't turn. Her footsteps padded across the floor behind me. Then came her voice, softer now, stripped of protest. "Take me home." I turned just in time to see my mother gently place the child back into Vanessa's arms. Her face broke completely as she drew the infant close to her chest, shoulders curling inward like she was trying to protect what little she had left. My mother then turned toward Celeste, and I saw it, her whole posture weighed down by the finality of her choice. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, voice wrapped in sorrow. "I truly hoped, needed, this child to be my grandson. But she took that hope from me." Her eyes moved between Vanessa and Celeste. "You are still my dearest friend, and nothing will change that. I know you have to stand beside your daughter. But now, I have to stand with my son." Celeste rose slowly and walked to her, no bitterness in her eyes. Only clarity. She extended her arms, and my mother stepped into the embrace without hesitation. "Semper Fi," Celeste murmured. "Always faithful, sister," my mother answered softly. She turned and walked past me without another word, each step deliberate. I followed her out, the door closing behind us with a whisper of finality. She climbed into the passenger seat of my car, silent. I started the engine. The drive was wordless. Every few minutes, I could feel her watching me out of the corner of her eye, like she was preparing herself to speak, then thinking better of it. When we arrived at her place, she got out first, walking toward the door with the same purposeful grace she'd always carried. She left it open for me. I hesitated, just for a moment, then followed her in. The house smelled like home, faint coffee, sun-warmed paperbacks, and the comforting scent of lavender drifting from a candle in the next room. She moved toward the kitchen without speaking. Cupboards opened and closed, the soft sound of porcelain and silver tapping gently into place. When she returned, she set a cup of coffee in front of me, rich and dark, with a touch of chocolate, just how I'd always liked it. I wrapped both hands around the warmth, but didn't drink. My throat was tight. She sat beside me, letting a long breath fall from her chest. Then she spoke. "I'm sorry, Daniel." Her voice cracked gently at the edges, heavy with remorse. I looked at her, but she kept her eyes down, tracing invisible lines into the palm of her hand. "I was selfish," she said. "I didn't want to lose the idea of the family I'd come to love. I didn't want to see you alone. But I was wrong. Please forgive me." I breathed in deeply, setting the cup down on the table between us. I knew this cost her. I know how long you and Celeste have shared your lives, I said quietly. I know why you did what you did. But it was too much for me, Mom. I was drowning, and I had no one in my corner. And just like that, I crumbled. My chest clenched. My breath broke apart. The months of silence, betrayal, isolation, all of it collapsed onto me at once. I couldn't speak. Couldn't even move. The tears came, hot and uncontrolled, slipping down my cheeks and into my hands as my shoulders shook. Then I felt her hand. Warm, firm, and steady. She reached across the space between us, brushing my hair back gently, just like when I was little. Her fingers didn't shake. They comforted. You did good, she whispered. You stayed true to yourself. You didn't bend, not even for me. Not even when you were alone. Her grip tightened slightly. I'm proud of you, Daniel. Her words echoed through me. Her apology, her loyalty, finally offered where it mattered most. But something else stuck in my mind, something she'd said back at Celeste's house. Semper Fi, I repeated, looking at her carefully. You said that to her? Why? She smiled, not with amusement, but with the weight of old memory. Oh, that? She said, her voice softening with nostalgia. That's just something from before. We were in the Marines together. Served in the Gulf. She leaned back slightly. We were part of the 40,000 women who deployed in Desert Shield and Desert Storm. We saw things, went through things, and then came back. Then I had you. I blinked, startled. You never told me any of this, I said, studying her face. She let out a soft chuckle, shoulders lifting in a modest shrug. Logistics support, nothing thrilling, she said. But there was something behind her words, a flicker in her gaze, like her mind had wandered to places her mouth wasn't ready to revisit. Her eyes shifted to the photo of my father sitting quietly on the nearby shelf. A tender expression washed over her face. Your father was a remarkable man, she said, almost to herself. A single tear traced down her cheek, but she wiped it away quickly, as if refusing to let the moment linger too long. Then, as if snapping herself back into the present, she straightened, squared her posture, and stood. Let me make you something to eat, she said, her voice once again calm and warm. I gave a small nod, quietly grateful. She moved with practiced ease in the kitchen, and for the first time in what felt like forever, there was no strain between us. We ate in silence, not the awkward kind, but the kind that carries understanding without needing words. After dinner, I stood and stretched. Thanks, Mom, I said. She reached across the table and gripped my hand with surprising firmness. Anytime, son. That night I returned home with a rare sense of calm. But the battle wasn't over. The divorce dragged on longer than expected. Vanessa refused to go quietly. I had filed on grounds of adultery, and she wasn't ready to let go, not of me, or the image of herself she was trying desperately to preserve. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with a permanent frown and eyes that saw too much, seemed almost antagonistic from the first hearing. Mr. Hale, she said, her tone edged with disapproval, it appears you're attempting to shirk your moral responsibilities. Marriage is a commitment. And regardless of conception, a child deserves stability. My jaw tensed. Stability? Morality? Where were these ideals when Vanessa was sneaking around with another man while carrying his child? Thankfully, my attorney, Ron Cartwright, was a master at handling loaded rhetoric. He leaned forward, his tone respectful but sharp. Your Honor, my client is not abandoning anything, he said, flipping to a tabbed page in our file. He is simply refusing to assume responsibilities that are not his. We have a verified paternity report. This child is not biologically his. As for the marriage, he wasn't the one who broke the vows. Mrs. Hale engaged in an ongoing affair with a coworker, Julian Cross. And we have ample documentation that this wasn't some lapse in judgment. It was calculated and sustained. Vanessa sat beside her attorney, back straight, face calm. But I could see the cracks in her composure, tiny tremors in her hands, the twitch in her jaw. Then it was her turn. And of course, she delivered a performance worthy of an award. I never meant to betray him, she said, her voice trembling with carefully practiced emotion. I was lonely. Daniel was constantly away for work, sometimes gone for weeks. I felt like I was living alone. Julian was just there. He listened. He cared. I wasn't looking to hurt anyone. I just needed something I wasn't getting. I ground my teeth. She had twisted herself into the role of the victim, the misunderstood, neglected wife. Ron didn't flinch. Did you continue communication with Mr. Cross after discovering you were pregnant? He asked. Vanessa shook her head immediately. No. As soon as I knew, I ended it. I wanted to focus on my marriage. Ron nodded, as if he expected that answer. He opened a folder and pulled out a stack of documents. Your Honor, Exhibit C, he said calmly. A collection of messages exchanged between Mrs. Hale and Mr. Cross, dating through the duration of her pregnancy. He handed them to the clerk. These messages not only confirm continued contact, but also reveal intimate conversations, emotional confessions, shared plans, and explicit efforts to hide the truth from my client. Vanessa's face paled, but she didn't fall apart. Instead, she gripped the edge of the table, and her voice lashed out in desperation. That doesn't prove I slept with him again, she snapped. Perhaps not, Ron responded evenly. But it does prove you never stopped choosing him over your husband. Ron didn't flinch. But it does establish that, despite her claims, Mrs. Hale maintained a clear emotional connection with Mr. Cross while still married. You stated you cut ties, but the digital trail says otherwise. Vanessa's lips pressed into a tight line, her gaze flicking nervously toward the judge, who continued scanning the documents with a restrained frown. Then Vanessa pivoted her tone. I was alone, she said, her voice trembling just enough. I felt abandoned. I didn't go looking for this. Julian pursued me. He took advantage of my vulnerability. I was weak. Hurt. What was I supposed to do when my husband barely acknowledged me anymore? The judge's expression shifted, her posture leaning ever so slightly forward. She seemed to register the plea, sympathy threatening to creep in. Ron saw it. And like a surgeon, he moved in with precision. Mrs. Hale, he said smoothly, his voice a touch sharper now. I understand. Your husband was away. You were needy. He lingered on the word just enough to twist the room's atmosphere. Vanessa shifted in her seat, uncomfortable. Let's clarify that, shall we? Ron continued calm and surgical. You claim Daniel was neglecting you. Is that accurate? Vanessa paused, weighing her words. Then she nodded slightly. Yes. Ron nodded, as though expecting it. Did you ever tell him that? Sit him down? Say, Daniel, your job is hurting our marriage. I need more time, more attention. Did you ever do that? She was silent. I watched the familiar pause, her mind scrambling to locate an escape hatch. But there wasn't one. Ron wasn't done. Mrs. Hale, you've painted this image of a lonely wife abandoned by a work-obsessed husband. Meanwhile, Julian Cross, the attentive co-worker, just so happened to be there. Listening. Comforting. Showering you with validation. He raised a brow. But tell me, was your husband unkind? Has Daniel never praised you? Never shown affection? Again silence. Ron turned to the judge, lifting a neatly compiled folder. Your Honor, here are posts from Mr. Hale's verified social media. Photos of dinner dates, anniversary tributes, birthday surprises. Public affirmations of love and appreciation. These aren't the habits of a cold, distant spouse. Then he looked back at Vanessa, his voice clipped and direct. So, let me ask clearly, was your infidelity Daniel's fault? Yes or no? Vanessa's jaw clenched. Her eyes flicked from the judge to Ron, then, briefly, to me. Finally, barely audible, she muttered, no. Ron let the silence do the talking. Then he stepped forward, his tone tightening. I've been listening to you for 2 hours, Mrs. Hale. And you haven't once owned up to your choices. Not once. You've blamed your husband. Blamed your circumstances. Blamed your feelings. But not once have you said the words, "I'm sorry." He took another step forward. "And here's what I can't reconcile. If Daniel is such a failure, if he's such a distant, cold husband, why are you so desperate to pull him back in? Why are you trying to coerce him into fathering a child that isn't his? Why are you demanding reconciliation with a man you betrayed and lied to?" He straightened his tie, then turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I want you to look at Mr. Hale. According to his wife, he's cold, inattentive, emotionally unavailable. In her version of this story, he's the villain. A man too absorbed in work to care. A man who failed her. But everything we've presented says otherwise." I exhaled slowly, the finality of everything beginning to sink in. Vanessa sat rigid, arms crossed, her gaze flicking uneasily between the judge and Ron. Ron didn't flinch. "Now, Your Honor," he said, his voice sharp yet controlled, "if Mrs. Hale truly believes her husband is cold, absent, and a failure, why would she want to remain in such a marriage? Why force herself to stay with someone she clearly doesn't respect? Why not build a life with Mr. Cross, the man she describes as kind, compassionate, and the child's actual father?" Vanessa's jaw tensed, her knuckles whitening as they clutched the edge of the table. But there was no rebuttal. No tears. Just silence. A bleak, bitter silence that settled over me like a shroud. The judge turned toward me, her eyes steady, her voice clear. "Mr. Daniel Hale, do you wish to pursue reconciliation with your wife?" I took a long breath. Let the question hang in the air for a second. Then I looked at Vanessa, at her red-rimmed, expressionless eyes, and I searched for something. Anger. Grief. Even regret. But there was nothing left inside me. "No, Your Honor," I said. My voice didn't shake. I felt calm. Clear. The judge gave a single nod. "Then this court declares the marriage dissolved. Community assets will be divided evenly and distributed accordingly." She struck the gavel. The sharp crack echoed like a gunshot in the still courtroom. Silence. Only the low scratching of the court reporter's pen broke the quiet. "Your Honor," Ron said, stepping forward again, "I'd like to remind the court that while Mrs. Hale has claimed Mr. Cross is the father of the child, this has not yet been verified by any legal documentation. At present, this rests solely on her testimony." He let the pause breathe, let the implications sit. "And given Mrs. Hale once insisted that the child belonged to my client, something we now know was untrue, I believe it's fair to say that her word is no longer sufficient on its own." Vanessa flinched at that, her head snapping toward Ron. "No!" she cried out suddenly, her voice breaking. "Julian is the father." Ron raised an eyebrow. "Mrs. Hale, forgive me, but you swore the same thing about Mr. Hale, publicly, emotionally, and with total confidence. And we all know how that turned out." He turned back to the judge. "So, until a legal paternity test confirms otherwise, we must proceed with caution." Ron returned to the heart of the matter. "But even putting the DNA aside, Your Honor, let's revisit what we know. If my client was as emotionally neglectful as Mrs. Hale claims, if he was so dismissive, uncaring, cold, why is she now trying to chain him to a child that isn't his? Why is she so desperate to keep him in her life?" The judge didn't speak. But her eyes narrowed slightly, the tension clear in her posture. The room was still. Everyone waiting. Then Vanessa exploded. She surged to her feet, her voice raw and frantic. "He's the best husband I've ever had," she shouted through sobs. "I love him. I want him back. I want him in our lives. My child couldn't ask for a better father than that man." The courtroom held its breath. The same woman who had betrayed me, lied to me, humiliated me, was now confessing her devotion like a lover from a tragic play. It would have been laughable, if it weren't so absurd. Ron didn't even blink. "Then tell me, Mrs. Hale," he said, voice calm, sharp, "why? Why did you cheat on him? Why did you tear your marriage apart?" Vanessa's lips trembled. Her hands trembled. She tried to speak, but only dry gasps came out. Then, in a sudden, broken rush, she sobbed, I was just horny. I wanted sex. That's all. A ripple moved through the courtroom like a quiet gasp. Even the judge blinked, her brows knitting in disbelief. Something between disappointment and sheer exhaustion passed across her face. Vanessa dropped into her chair like a marionette with cut strings, her head in her hands, her shoulders convulsing with shame. Mrs. Hale, that's enough, the judge said, rubbing her temple. You may step down. Vanessa didn't move. Not at first. Then she slowly rose and staggered back to her seat, collapsing silently beside her attorney. Court is adjourned. We will reconvene in 2 weeks, the judge said flatly, striking her gavel. 2 weeks later, I sat once again on the same cold bench in the same wood-paneled courtroom, surrounded by the same dull murmur of whispered voices and shuffling papers. But something had changed. Something inside me had settled. Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you loved this revenge story, subscribe to the channel for more. This was Whisper Secrets. Thanks for listening.